set up. We're good to go. Yeah.
Is my mic fine?
Your mic sounds wonderful.
Yeah, your mic fine.
Okay, perfect. Alright, yeah.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and screen share and get a live stream going because I actually do want to screen share some of this stuff. But I came across a post like this. I come across posts like this every once in a while. And, this post, not too long ago, December, China is irrelevant for the most part. This is the arrogance I've talked about for a while, and I might actually make a dedicated video essay to this. China is irrelevant. Like, the entire attitude of the West is that it is the center of the world. It is the middle kingdom. And ironically enough, China saw itself that way 200 years ago, where it had the tributary system. I've actually been going through a little bit of research on the century humiliations because I find it absolutely fascinating. Is because while we compare ourselves to the Roman Empire, and there are definitely parallels to the Roman Empire, there's a lot we share with China before its century of humiliation, where it was colonized by the British Empire. And
so something that we noticed with the Roman Empire before it collapsed.
Yeah.
Oh, and anything around us is irrelevant.
Yeah, with DeepSeek coming out, and it's literally a project that was funded with less than 5.5 million, and right now Trump just announced dedicating 500 billion to OpenAI and a couple of other American AI companies. DeepSeek has been absolutely tearing apart a lot of the models that exist for OpenAI. Claude, it outperformed Claude. It is basically ripping apart these existing AI models for a fraction of the price, energetically much less expensive. You can run it on a Raspberry Pi and it can do its job. It doesn't need these fancy GPU systems. And so, the thing is for a long time, the United States has coped about this, saying China, its engineering is terrible. I've been talking about for 5 years that China's engineers are not somebody to be looked down upon. They're not stupid. Everyone talks about German engineering. I'm going to talk about Chinese engineering. Is because a lot of the stuff they're doing is they're very much setting up an alternative ecosystem. But I want to get back to the century humiliation because this is more relevant. I came across this person. China's irrelevant for the most part. After DeepSeek, yada, 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 this person came around. I'll go ahead and read it for you in the chat. The R1 should be a setting off alarm bells in the entire Western capitalist apparatus. For the first time in a while, I'm genuinely afraid the U.S. is losing its dominance, its influence, its capacity to innovate, and its ability to outcompete on a global scale. The core issue isn't just regulatory capture or bureaucratic inertia. The real problem is also the managerial class, a bloated, risk-averse, overpaid, overglorified layer that has systematically dismantled the mechanism that's once made the U.S. competitive. Meta is a great example of this. Look what happened with Llama. That's with a founder running it. Now imagine Google, where there is a professional manager running at a 5K VPs underneath. Meanwhile, China is surging ahead not just in drones, but in world-class AI models. It's the entire ecosystem. Robots are building other robots at scale. Their tech is cheap, effective, and ubiquitous. All right. The world's supply chain, its manufacturing core, is de facto Chinese. China isn't just catching up, it's scaling the future. The West continues down this path, short-term thinking, managerial inefficiency, and a refusal to prioritize strategic innovation. It risks becoming irrelevant in the face of a system designed for precision and long-term dominance. This isn't just a challenge, it's an existential threat to Western economic and technological leadership. And I've said this for a while. Back when I was a technocrat, before I was a Marxist, I admired the technocratic thinking of China's system, even though there are so many people coping that they're either capitalists and they're not doing anything the United States isn't doing, or they're communists and therefore they couldn't innovate. And this was back in 2020. Okay. And I've dealt with the sting of this. One of the things when I got into politics, and is that I recognized that charisma and the ability to talk to people is one of the things you need to get ahead, especially in the cloud economy. And unfortunately, that's directly inversely proportional to actually getting competent people in a position of power. What's up, Greg? We're also streaming. Just want to give you full information, about the chat. I've dealt with this in real life, where you have the managerial parasite class, literally, because I'm an engineer, and they yank your chain in a million different directions. You've got retards at the helm that are basically trying to take things a million different directions. They don't understand what they're doing, but they get the power of basically telling an engineer what to do is because they just see engineers as pencil neck retards to be pushed around. And the thing is, in a high school setting, this makes sense because now everybody wants to be the bully in some stupid sense. That's the current culture. Nerds are uncool or some shit, and everybody wants to bully larp. Now it's funny on a local scales because there are socially awkward people out there, but on a civilizational scale, it's devastating when you basically neuter your any capability to actually make any decent progress. So the DeepSeek team, okay, it wasn't even some top of the line research group that came up with DeepSeek. It was literally a bunch of quant traders that had a bunch of spare time, literally autistic nerds with some spare time and some spare money that decided to create this model, and it just happened to outperform every Western model in existence. All the proprietary solutions that, Washington, D.C. is talking about policing and making sure that it doesn't get in the wrong hands. It kind of reminds me back when the Soviet Union in the 70s, and it's something you might not know. But did you know in the Soviet Union, the fast Fourier transform was classified? In the United States, it was completely open. They didn't give a shit. But in China, in the Soviet Union, it was considered this classified advanced technology.
I don't understand.
Okay,
I know that.
We're in that position now. I don't want to hog up the chat. I know I've been talking for a while, but these things culminate. The arrogance and the culture of Western civilization is going to basically continually put the West behind. I mean, we all know the answer to this. Nobody wants to admit it, but we all know the answer to this on why culturally we are going down this route. I can go on Twitter and look at some retard, both from the left and the right have their post hoc rationalization on why they hate intellectuals. And don't get me wrong, intellectuals aren't perfect either. They kind of, you can look at Destiny on why the reason why most people hate the intelligentsia nowadays.
Right, which is funny. Which is funny because when you look at China, they've actually, in many ways, created the solidarity between the proletariat and the intellectualist, right? And it's mainly because they prioritize the development of the well-being above all. They're not in it for a profit incentive. They haven't been for a long time. And they still serve and are ruled by the global hegemony of capitalism, no doubt. But it's also important to realize that the structure of this arrogance managerial class, this is a foreign concept to most of modern China. They wouldn't even understand why greed and profit incentive is even prioritized in most countries. And it's because the lifestyle and development of China itself is for the societal benefit of all. It is for the overall arcing a goal of achieving a higher development for the civilization, not just for one particular group.
Yeah, they're not ideologues. They're pragmatists. They're pragmatic Marxists, and that's in my opinion the way you should be a Marxist, is a pragmatist at the end of the day.
And honestly,
if you're an idealist who is in principle an idealist, and you're constantly finger wagging, and you're always talking about moral frameworks, and you don't understand Marxism. And so that's the thing about the Chinese, is they abandoned that overly moralistic framework and recognized that pragmatically developing their civilization, that's the golden ticket.
And honestly,
the United States,
in many ways, it's better to be pragmatic than it is to be dogmatic, which I feel like a lot of the current ruling class in the West is very dogmatic. They suffer from a lot of dogmatism, and it's from the dogmatism that they're suffering from that is, well, it's worsening conditions overall, right? And then honestly, it is kind of isolating and separating the ruling classes as a whole, right? We're seeing this kind of split happen with the managerial section of the ruling class, and with the more technical and more finance section, right? And this is kind of where we look at Elon, we look at Bezos, we look at the current cabinet of the current administration, and we have to realize that they have a different interest than the rest of the ruling class, and that the rest of the ruling class is only in it because they are seeking some sort of common antagonistic behavior. But this is going to be the separation that we see within the ruling class. The ruling class is either going to have to make concessions, or they're going to completely diverge, and we're going to see a complete collapse culturally and societally of America. They're not going to suffer from it. We are.
Yep. I've been saying this. It's the same with climate change, but that's another topic for another conversation.
I wanted to get back on this like 5-6 minutes ago when we were talking about like that tweet. But the thing with like arrogance is the fact that like when you're this blinded by fucking arrogance, something that's like a slow moving trolley feels like you're getting hit by a fucking bullet train.
Yeah. I'm gonna pull this up real quick.
Issue. If you live in a society that's not fucking help itself, right? Like America, for example.
Wow.
You would see this a mile away. I expected this. I expected by the mid to late 2020s that China would be well ahead of America. Look at this.
Yeah. Engineers are far superior decision makers than business and law grad word cells. And that's no shot at law and grad word cells. But the thing is like there is a certain level of thinking you get when you go into the harder sciences and mathematics that nobody likes to admit is because, again, when somebody, it's called tall poppy syndrome, okay? When somebody feels intimidated by somebody who knows more than them, they naturally go in a state where they have the need to humiliate somebody they feel is better than them, okay? And that mentality is just so rife within the West. I've had to deal with it in my own workplace whenever I talk about my side projects. I get, there's always that one person that has the incessant need to tear me down. And it's the same sense like for other people as well, right? And so the thing is that like, instead of being antagonistic and hostile for somebody that's good at what they do, whether it doesn't even have to be engineering, it could be like, 3D modeling, it could be whatever. Okay, it could be music, right? Recognizing and kind of enabling that kind of pursuit of passion is a healthier approach civilizationally to allowing people to contribute to society in their own unique way. We all have different passions and talents and capabilities and the ability to contribute to society in our own unique ways. And instead of trying to tear people down over that sorts of stuff, recognizing difference and enabling people to pursue their passions is, well, again, one of the things China's doing.
Absolutely.
I've noticed it here. Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. I was just explaining to a friend of mine earlier today, right? Because I was actually just bowling with my friends. That's why my voice sounds a little stifled right now. It's because I'm kind of losing it. But no, I was telling him, right? Generally speaking, the mentality that people can live a better lifestyle will generally create a better living condition. If you have that aspiration to do what you do and do what you love and do it at the best of your ability and do it in a way which is comforting to you and will better you, your life conditions, despite the societal system, you will generally, as an individual, improve in everything you do, the way you live, the way you interact with your day-to-day experiences. China prioritizes this.
Hold on, I gotta put this out too. With like engineering and like any sort of STEM field, the thing is you're working on pragmatic stuff. You're being pragmatic. You're not really. Most of the time, you're not really being creative, unless it's like to find a solution, right? Yeah. And in which case, that makes sense. That's like the one case of like creativity. Otherwise, you're mostly pragmatic. And even then, in that creativity, you're pragmatic. When you're doing stuff like law, when you're doing word cell stuff, right? You're essentially you're just creative. You're not focusing on solutions. You're not creative in the sense of being in the sense of making a solution. And so that's also a big issue. That's also why, that's exactly that's quite literally why STEM majors do better for the world, like even in politics, because they're looking more so at creative ways to actually fix issues rather than creative ways to creative ways to just say what the issue is and quote unquote how to solve it and never actually do it.
Yep.
Yeah.
I've noticed this mentality, within the West, okay? And you basically have a very boomer-centric, geriatric society where the opinions of the old, because they always browbeat you with experience. It even kind of translates into engineering as well, is because the skills gap is a thing, right? Companies will literally head snipe, more experienced engineers between companies rather than train a new engineer, because they don't want to put up that initial investment where they have to actually treat their employee well so they stay. Okay. And so the interesting thing about the DeepSeek people is that they were literally just a group of autistic nerds. And like I'm pretty sure I have a couple of posts here, right, where they basically kind of enable when it comes to innovation in China is they don't go for industry veterans. They don't go for the more experienced person. They go for people who they think have raw talent and they invest in those people. And they basically like, you know what, we're going to throw a bunch of money at you because you're an autistic nerd and we think something's going to good at. And I know this is the case, okay, because I'll give you a couple examples, okay. The Linux kernel was developed by a college student who was bored, okay. DeepSeek is the same thing. It was a side project for somebody, okay. The best projects don't come out of the free market. They don't come out of the profit motive. They come out of people who basically are autistic retards that just like, you know, I'm going to do something and it turns out to hit somewhere. It ends up being useful. Okay.
I mean, even Minecraft's an example of it.
Yeah, basically, he was a truck driver, for fuck's sake. Okay. Like, and he did it in his spare time because he just had an interest towards it, right? But the current capitalist system, because they're talking about raising the retirement age, right? And it all goes down to, I don't mean to fucking Jehu pill anybody, right? Because like Jehu, damn Jehu from that used to be an infrared. But it literally goes down to free time and the ability for people to explore their own passions independently without having to constantly work when they're already talking about like raising the retirement age here. Okay. You know, or canceling remote work. You know, destroying people's ability to pursue their passions is quite literally what's tearing down Western civilization and turning it into effectively a brute labor slave state where it relies on brute labor for everybody else, but individuality is only allowed to be expressed by those who have money.
And I've been saying this for a while now, right? The fact that the Republican Party and moreover the current Republican administration has worked devastatingly to de-incentivize further education and for people to explore their passions outside of public schooling. This has created a tragedy in the workforce. This is where, yeah, sure, we can be anti-immigrant, we can be anti mass immigration all we want, because in a way mass immigration does affect the working class. But what is the point of even trying to account for that when the working class isn't even going and doing the jobs that are needed the most for the development of the nation? Why should we care about getting rid of Mexicans when Indians are coming over and replacing us on that front, right? I mean, we are losing the very foundation of what it means to be a developing working class.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what else to say. It's because, like, you know, all you can do is kind of share these ideas. Sharing these ideas, because, like, we're not going anywhere. I kind of recognize it. Like, you know, one of the things that, like, I've seen with, like, the PSYOP divisions within the United States, they deliberately gatekeep you from garnering an audience to make sure that only the right voices are seen. Okay, and that's very deliberate. It's called algorithmic censorship. And so, but the thing is who they're enabling to speak, who they're allowing to speak and, you know, dictate the narrative, they're the ones that are literally bringing down all of society because they would rather keep their heads up their asses for they'd rather rule in hell than be a servant in heaven. Okay. And that's what it comes down to. They want to maintain their grasp of power and insulate themselves from any kind of suffering, no matter if they're incompetent, is because their entire existence, you know, is at stake. They want to keep themselves in power rather than just letting more capable people rule. And so it's coming to that. It's very difficult. And then on top of that, you have a culture that's antagonistic to it, right? You know, you look at like these like Chinese posts, okay? You know, they openly don't care about, here it is. The only reason you need word cells is because engineers typically lack stat points and charisma or bullshitting to successfully convince the masses to make them listen. But that's why the CCP works so well. You don't have to convince the masses. The engineers simply tell you what to do and you have to do it. You're going to like it, you know. And this was over this post right here, you know. I don't know what to tell. They're essentially forming Plato's Republic, but doing it in a manner that benefits everybody. Like, that's kind of the thing. Like, a lot of people within the Western civilization, because Platonic philosophy is Western philosophy,
right?
It originated in Greek civilization, and the Republic by Plato was published to basically critique like the decay of Athenian democracy and the popularity contest where, you know, entertainers basically take the helm of the ship as opposed to more capable leaders who are less charismatic. But the thing is that our ruling class literally think that they are the Platonic rulers that are capable of governing civilization, but they don't know how to govern. Our ruling class is inept and retarded. The bureaucracy that's maintaining it through propaganda is retarded. They're just going with it. I've always said this for a while. Okay, copes come and copes go, but at the end of the day, is that the truth comes out eventually. And, it might be today or tomorrow, but eventually it comes out. And, there's a lot of hurt feelings and people get really upset is because they cope all the way to the end. And then you look in the mirror and it's kind of like the Tom and Jerry episode where Tom looks in the mirror and you just see Jackass like pop up on the other side. And, because if they had just kind of accepted the truth now and they acted on the truth and recognized what the problem was, they could have acted better and kind of mitigated the problem. But they don't. They don't want to do that is because they want to maintain their marginal influence over a society that doesn't even like them because they're just enriching themselves at the expense of everybody else. That's where we're at.
And honestly, right now, it's the only responsibility that we have as Marxists is throwing out ideas. That is our responsibility. Because right now we are not in the situation where we are going to be on the front of leading a revolution. That's just not where we are. And I'm not saying that a revolution is not going to happen in 2 to 10 years time, because I believe that one will. But
yes,
right now, where we are, and the responsibility that we have, the role that we're playing, is giving the working class the tools in order to come to the consensus themselves. That's where we're at. And we only do this by throwing these ideas out there. And yeah, we can point to China all day long. We can point to Cuba. We can point to Vietnam, Venezuela. We can point to most socialist leaning or socialist current states, and we can see the methods in which they are going about it, how they have developed themselves. But until the imperial core until the population of the imperial core can recognize that it is just show business by the ruling class, we are not going to make any leaps forward, any massive leaps forward.
Yep. Yeah, in other words, we're stuck. We're not going anywhere.
It is funny,
though. All we can do is talk to people.
It is funny, though, because look at the ratings right now. Look at the statistics right now. Trump has the highest popularity than any presidential candidate has ever had in our history. This is a lot right now. And yeah, we have to realize he's a populist. Everything that he said he was going to do, he said day one. Did he not? He said day one, gas prices would go down. Now, I do believe gas prices will go down. They absolutely will. But
it's going to go up.
I actually don't believe so. I believe
it's going to go up. It's going to go up, and by a good bit.
At the end of his presidency, yes, I do think that the prices are going to go up temporarily.
I'm talking immediately.
I don't believe so.
With the sanctions and tariffs and a lot of imported oil.
Here's why.
Canada is getting 25% tariffs.
Sure.
February 1st.
Yeah, yes, I understand that.
Import a lot of oil.
I understand that. But what's going on right now is a lot of the companies and corporations in the U.S., they stockpiled ahead of time before these tariffs were in place. And so the first... Say that again?
They're still going to charge more and more.
I understand that. But until their supply runs low, and which it will in a year to 2 years' time, it's going to run low. That's when we, the working class, is going to feel it through our own tax dollars in America. But what's going to end up happening with the gas prices is, because of the degree of Federal Reserve of oil that we have, all he has to do is let out a 10% stock of oil, and immediately gas.
Do you guys want to take this to the stage on the Wage Rage Radio?
Yeah, let's do it.
I mean,
I'll go ahead and open up the stage.
It's already like 1:30 a.m.
That's true.
All right, okay, let's go.
Wait, radio. Yeah, so like that's kind of the thing. It's going to be more of a closed off stream, but we're going to be going over the regulars. Where is my Linux command? Okay, cool. Yeah, no. The thing about it is that you already got the stream set up.
Yeah, no, it's rolling. It's rolling.
Okay, cool. Yeah. No, like the thing is that like coming across this post, not this one particularly, but this one previously, the United States is falling behind because essentially, like a lot of people make comparisons that it's like the Roman Empire, which in a lot of parallels it is. And I'm not going to deny that. But there's also a large parallel with China. And that's a less commonly understood one, okay? Because before the century of humiliation, the Chinese saw themselves as the center of civilization. They saw themselves as the Middle Kingdom. And they had the tributary system where every foreign power, when they came to visit China, they had to offer tributes to the emperor. Okay? And so when the British Empire began contact with the Chinese in the 17th and 18th century, there were multiple attempts because the British Empire was currently going the process of industrialization. It was colonizing the world. It was already at the peak of colonization. You could say the 19th century was the peak of the British Empire. And so Emperor King Long, when he was offered the different trinkets and where industrialization was going on in the British Empire, I'll go ahead and read to you. It's a very, very interesting thing. You're going to kind of seeing it with the technology sphere with DeepSeek and like AI and quantum computing, with China's just surging ahead. But King Long, the emperor famously told the British this: "We possess all things. I set no value in objects strange or ingenious, and have no use for your country's manufacturers." And they arrogantly basically told off the British that we have no use for your fancy trinkets. And then years later, they were colonized. That's a little wild. The British Empire was in the heart of industrialization, and it was so arrogant. The Chinese were so arrogant that they didn't see that the rest of the world was moving on beyond their tepid, their decrepit legalist system. And you're seeing it happening right now with America, and how many of these different tech bros and Sam Altman and all these coping tech bros about AI. They're like,
ban DeepSeek as well.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if they try and ban DeepSeek because, of course, if they can't actually compete, they're going to do what the Chinese did with the British Empire, is basically try and expel them and make them pay in silver. And so I wouldn't be surprised if they do that because it's a cope. But the thing is that there's this thing called reality, okay? And reality sets in, and copes come and copes go. But at the end of the day, as much as you want to cope and you want to gaslight yourself about reality, reality sets in whether you like to believe it or not, okay? And it's going to move forward. It doesn't care about your feelings, okay? You can't, if you're going to moralize against it and say, well, the Chinese are bugmen and they have no capacity for ingenuity, that's a cope. And copes always get swept up by history, okay? Reality is like unceasing tide. It does not give a fuck about your feelings, okay? And so the cope and the gaslighting only bites us in the ass, and we fall further behind when we let that sorts of stuff happen to us. Okay. Like I said, I was going over this tweet. I came across it. That's actually why I striked up this conversation with American Marxism in the first place, is because the thing is that the copes eventually run out. I'll go ahead and read it. Okay. I read it earlier. Yeah, I've already read it to the stream chat, but this is more or less for like the stage chat here. The R1 drop should be setting off alarm bells for the entire Western capitalist apparatus. For the first time in a while, I'm genuinely afraid the U.S. is losing its dominance, its influence, its capacity to innovate, its ability to outcompete on a global scale. The core issue isn't just regulatory capture or bureaucratic inertia. The real problem is the managerial class, a bloated, risk-averse, overpaid, overglorified layer that systematically dismantled the mechanism that's once made the U.S. competitive. Meta is a great example of this. Look what happened with Llama, which is an AI model that's with a founder running it. Now imagine Google, where there is a professional manager running it and a 5K's VP's underneath. Meanwhile, China is surging ahead, not just in drones, but now or world-class AI models. It's an entire ecosystem. Robots are building other robots at scale. Their tech is cheap, effective, and ubiquitous. The world supply chain, its manufacturing core, is de facto Chinese. The China isn't just catching up. It's scaling the future. The West continues down its path, short-term thinking and managerial inefficiency, and a refusal to prioritize strategic innovation. It risks becoming irrelevant in the face of a system designed for the precision of long-term dominance. This isn't just a challenge, it's an existential threat to Western economic and technological leadership. Okay? And he's right. He's right. Okay. The thing is that I mean, I have a little comment here that I was planning on throwing on there just a little while ago. 200 years ago, China felt the painful sting of falling behind the Western powers in terms of technological progress. And it's true. Okay. It's happening right now. We have an arrogant society where the United States culturally thinks it's the center of the world. Its values and liberal civilization. I'm not trying to overquote Dugan here, right? But Western civilization thinks it's the center of the world, particularly America. Its value system, its cultural norms, it's everything. Okay,
That's a part of the that's honestly, Alistair, part of this American exceptionalism mythology, right?
Yeah.
And we have to understand America has long since the dawn of the 20th century found itself being the most developed imperial core. And it really is impressive seeing the leap that China took in the 1950s and seeing how far it has come since then. We have to understand China was severely underdeveloped in terms of modernization in the late half of the 20th century. And the way that they boomed in the 1990s after the collapse of the Soviet Union, due to their very materialist method of applying changes based on the needed requirements, right? Because they did this through a materialist analysis. The reforms that they took with were based on the consumptions of what were needed within the Chinese system. And so, yeah, they've excelled beyond anything that anyone ever thought that they would. There are statistics that are showing China is years ahead of anything that anyone could have predicted for 2020. It's crazy.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
There is very little competitive motive behind the current production line across the globe. China is dominating in most aspects on the global market. And this is where Western hegemony is being threatened the most.
And this is how the Western ruling class is kind of reacting to this threat. And this is why the stupidity of our ruling class is legitimately dumb. Like, the political right kind of treats the ruling class as this like omnipotent god that's like, overly, I mean, they're obviously pedophiles and stuff like that. It's not a fucking hidden secret with Epstein's Island. But they treat them like these kind of lizard gods or some shit. They have an overly conspiratorial vision because they believe axiomatically the American system is the best system to ever exist, and only something that's as malevolent as an evil could corrupt the system within. Okay, rather than it's just self-serving greed that is basically taking down the United States. And so the thing about it, this is how the ruling class is going to handle this situation. This is how they're going to go about it. And I've already started to see it. Okay, you're probably going to start seeing it too. Okay, the way the ruling class is going to handle this is they're going to see China accelerating ahead. And so the ruling class, do you think that they're going to try and give public health care? Do you think they're going to try to make things better for the American worker? Do you think they're going to do any welfare programs?
They're going to double down.
No, they're going to double down. Like, oh, well, China's passing us. Well, we need to change the 40-hour work week to the 80-hour work week. We need to work people harder for less because, and you already see this. Okay, look at
what they're literally going to do is they're going to do the same shit that they said that China is doing with their 996. Oh, they're doing slave labor or slavery, and then they're going to say, oh, we need to catch up to China for doing exactly what they accused China of doing 10 years ago as being quote unquote terrible.
They're going to bring out the slave whip, and because they think that is the only way to do it. It's no different than the Roman Empire when it was in its late decaying stages. Basically, you know what we're going to do? We're going to do defensive policies. We're going to implement laws where you can't change your job. You have to work your same job forever. Is because you need to basically work 10 times harder waging to make sure that like the American empire continues. Okay, even though it's like a cope. Okay, just beating the whip isn't going to do anything. Okay, which is ironically enough the same thing that happened in legalist China. Like they tried to bring out the whip and crack their own people, and thought that was going to give them success, but they didn't recognize that ingenuity and actually allowing people to pursue their passions in a meaningful way is actually what allowed their civilization to thrive. Okay, they don't recognize it, and so but now China does. Okay, I can go over countless tweets on Twitter and I've already gone this a couple of times, but I'll go over it again. Why is the Chinese political system superior? It's governed by technocrats and engineers who seek advice and consultation from the experts in all fields. AI firm DeepSeek CEO Lian, whatever, I'm not going to butcher that because I can't speak Chinese to save my life. I'm a fucking cracker here, okay? I mean half cracker. Are invited by Premier Li to a consultation work group. They're asked to provide feedbacks and draft government reports, okay? And so the thing is, I'm going to go ahead and go here too as well, right? I came across another T. Engineers are far superior decision makers. The only reason why word cells, you need word cells is because engineers typically lack stat points and charisma or bullshitting to successfully convince the masses to make them listen. But that's why the CCP works so well. You don't have to convince the masses. The engineers simply say what needs to be done and it gets done. The thing is that there's a pragmatic approach to it that the West doesn't want to do. In the West, democracy is a popularity contest, and you can see countless of these Chinese comments pointing out this sort of stuff. But they don't just allow what they do with their engineers differently than what we do with ours. They don't just allow them to go completely unhinged, right? It has to be the benefit of their civilization first and foremost, okay? They don't just grant authority willy-nilly. In a sort of way, China is forming Plato's republic, his ideal republic of philosopher kings that govern society, but for the best interest of society. They're not philosopher kings that are free to do whatever they want. They have a responsibility to develop their civilization, and they don't care about popularity contest.
Marxism a sociology, like the king of sociology, or like father, whatever the fuck they call it, is fucking stupid. He's more so a philosopher and a scientist.
He's a philosopher. Yeah, he's a scientist of history. That's what I call him. He studied and developed the science of history. He's not just a mere sociologist. He acknowledged the real material conditions that lead to revolutionary change and societal struggle and what changes between most
sociologists would be just like full of gaslighting.
Yeah, and that's kind of the thing. It's like, the way the East sees Marx is different than the way the West sees Marx. And this is one of the bigger problems with the broader left I could talk endlessly about. But the thing is that, like, they have a very materialist understanding. We in the West, when it comes to Western Marxism, is that we see him as just the father of sociology, and that's it. He's in his own specialized domain, detached from everything else. No. Dialectical and historical materialism is a science. It's a science of history, recognizing the real material foundations of society and what leads to its change. Okay? It's not necessarily just an analysis of like some kind of Foucaultian analysis of like, social power structures that exist in a vacuum by itself. I don't know how Foucault even got associated with Marx. Like, the only thing that he took from Marx is the idea of oppressor and oppressee, but that's not even unique to Marx. Plenty of people.
No, this idea existed long before Marx. It is important to understand this idea of oppressor and oppressee. This existed long before Marx. Marx only used this to further his understanding of his class theory, right? Of his theory of dialectical and historical materialism. That's the only reason that he incorporated the understanding of oppressor and oppressee into his works. But it is important to understand that many egalitarian and utopian socialists long before Marx even spoke of this.
Yeah.
It's literally existed since the dawn of fucking civilization, this concept.
So I fully expect the Western ruling class to just crack the whip and act like that's going to be a solution. Okay, they're going to crack the whip. Like even Trump issued an executive order, and there's currently a government union strike. So for all federal employees, all federal government employees, they are now required to return to the office.
My brother's being affected by this actually because my brother works for NASA, right? And he actually lives 62 miles outside, away from Kennedy, and he actually, when he came to NASA, he got an exemption. They gave him a special exemption. They made our house, by all technicality, an official NASA base, so he could work from home. Because that was the only way that they were going to hire him. By the way, in order to work,
an engineer.
he is. He's actually the lead network architect of NASA.
That makes sense.
Yeah. He is very important. If you look him up, you'll easily find him, and then you can easily find out who I am. But just please don't do that.
I'm not gonna do that.
But either way, right? The point is, to work at NASA, you actually have to be within a 50-mile radius of the center that you are working.
Yeah. So no, that's kind of the thing. Like the West needs to. I know a lot of people, especially on both the right and left, hate the idea of a meritocracy. But the meritocracy is not just for like people to just stroke the egos at the top. That's not how that works. Okay. The thing is that it is genuinely beneficial to actually respect professionalism and expertise for all of civilization. Okay. Why do you listen to your doctor? You listen to your doctors because he spent 8 years in medical school or some crazy shit and a bunch of medical training doing all the stuff that you couldn't do yourself. And so you trust his opinion more than somebody else's is because he spent a tremendous amount of time or her amount of time studying things that you either couldn't do or didn't want to do. And it could be either or, maybe even both. Okay. And so the thing is that you don't have that kind of respect for these kinds of things in the West. And it's kind of leading to its decline. You don't really have respect for any of the working class.
I will drink raw milk and get fucking gut bacteria.
Yeah, raw milk. I love that. It's a great way to get listeria and probably like destroy your brain. No, that's kind of the thing. We have that, and those narratives sell very well. The Soviets used to laugh at the Americans over how conspiratorial they were. It's kind of a miracle if you really think about it that the Industrial Revolution started in the Anglospheres because like most of the revolutions in the Anglosphere, they were religious revolts by I still remember his name, but his revolt was literally against the king is because he didn't believe in God enough. That's how retarded it was. Okay. The only major revolt you had like the English peasant revolt. The Anglosphere has actually been the cruelest to its working class of all the Europeans. Over the French, the Germans, probably even like the Norwegians, Scandinavians. The thing is the Anglosphere has always ruled their people with heavy-handed tactics, which is ironic that the United States would talk so much about freedom, even though they're the least revolutionary base. They've never had a revolution over the last 250 years. Like the thing is,
just painted with freedom.
Yeah, exactly. Like the thing is it wasn't until the Black Plague killed off a third of Europe was there a peasant revolt in England. Okay, that's how insane it is in the Anglosphere. That might actually change. I think it's actually going to start changing, is because the thing is people have their limits, they have their patience. Otherwise, if it doesn't happen, the route it's going to go. Okay, we all seen the late stage Roman Empire where everyone's just kind of cucking it on the behest of their lord, and the vast majority of people are slaves, just kind of getting by to basically appease a parasitic ruling class that quite literally is just, enriching themselves at the expense of everybody else. Keep working harder, wage. I need you to get me an additional grapevine so I can fucking, just kind of enjoy your suffering kind of bullshit while the rest of the world moves on.
And honestly, one thing that we could also point to as a clear example of this, a lot of people I don't think want to point this out because I think this is a scary reality that people are coming to conclude, right? But look at late stage capitalist Germany after World War One. We are seeing a lot of those same conditions occur under a modern America. We are seeing the very formation of an oligarchic class that is taking leadership and taking it into the constraints of benefiting themselves. And by the way, it is also important to point out that the very development of the working class itself is being hindered on this idea of, well, there's an external threat. This external threat is the immigration, right? And then they will blame it on immigration all they want. As long as your focus is turned to the Mexicans from the southern border, you're not going to notice all the influx of Indians coming through the 401ks. You're not going to be paying attention to that. But what this is actually going to do, it's going to de-incentivize further education. It's going to de-incentivize American workers going into the most developed sectors of the economy, such as STEM, medical, and so forth, right? The actual vital necessities that we need in order to live. Those kind of labor jobs are not going to be the ones the vast majority of Americans are going to be going into. Because what jobs do immigrants from the South actually take on? They take on the cheap labor jobs. They take on lumber. They may take on some construction jobs, but a lot of them at the end of the day, actually end up working fast food, or they open up little mom and pop Chinese, Mexican shops, right? And this is where they are hyper focused at. And this is because they don't need a college degree to do any of this. They just do it because that's what's openly available in the economy. So if we remove all of these immigrations, by the way, it's not even mass immigration that's occurring. It's only it's just immigration. It's just immigration on a relative scale that's been occurring in America for the last 20 years. They just try to make it seem like it's mass immigration, which all Marxists are generally against mass immigration. But until we see substantial replacement of the American working class, it's ridiculous to even make the notion that there's mass immigration. And this is honestly just a kind of LARP tactic by the ruling class to legitimize mass deportation.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to backfire. I mean, I don't want to make an excuse for the Democrats, like trying to use like cheap labor to justify not paying Americans, because that's obviously disastrous. But, you know, we also have to recognize the disastrous policies of basically removing this entire workforce, which the American people rely on. That's going to have devastation towards the prices. Like, let's be honest here. Like, you know, the thing is what Trump is doing is effectively self-sanctioning the United States. Okay, getting rid of the immigrant labor. Okay, sure, whatever. Let go for it, man. I don't care. But doing the tariffs on Canada and Mexico, our two nearest neighbors that we rely on a lot. The reason why the United States has had such a territorial advantage was because it had neighbors that were, number one, weak, and number two, were not antagonistic to its existence. That's not the case anymore. Mexico doesn't listen to the United States. It's because the United States is too busy being retarded and racist towards Mexico to recognize that, like, okay, now they're just creating a hostile power to the south. Even though they're weak, it's still not nothing. Okay?
It's still hostile.
And then Canada as well, which they're talking about doing better trade relationships with China. Like, the United States is effectively doing a self-sanction on itself. You know, the thing is, the United States did a ton of sanctions against countries previously.
Canada, like specifically Alberta, fucking produces a lot of crude oil for America that you guys fucking refine and then send back over here. Yeah, obviously it's going to cost even more here, but it's still going to, you guys are still going to have a pretty sharp increase in gas prices. That first expected.
Yeah. Also, don't forget to post the stream and the announcements or something like that.
I
mean,
will.
You know, that's kind of the thing. I'm going to be honest. Like, I think more people are probably going to watch a stream after the fact, and I think that's probably better. Is because having recyclable ideas that people can kind of go back and reference is probably going to be better.
No, that's fine. I'll post the link after I'm done.
You know, even if America has the like the barrels of oil as like reserves, they're going to charge out the ass anyways, just because it's an opportunity, and it just means more profit for them.
Yep.
So no, it's not going to go down. It's going to go up already.
Yeah.
So
it's already been a month of Trump.
The only reason that I do believe that they are going to go down, and it's only gas prices that are going down, nothing else is going down. The only reason is because as much as we know the flaw of the system altogether, as much as we recognize as Marxists that supply and demand is a stupid system, the market is always failing, and the market is currently failing right now as well. But the fact is, right, they just need to give out 10% of the stock. Because remember, Alaska sits on the biggest oil reserve in the entire world. That is just a fact. And honestly, that's what Trump's going to do, because what's going to end up happening is his popularity rate is going to go down. And in order to have a saving grace of his popularity, to secure that people don't turn against him, he's going to bring down gas prices. So people are less domestically hostile towards him. That's what we need to be prepared for, is we need to be prepared for the alternative of him trying to make appeals to the people that he's upsetting. That way he doesn't create this hostile revolutionary sentiment. He's going to try to pacify us as much as he can, because what happens every
There's not
time.
much you can do about that.
Right.
That's kind of the thing. Because people are having decent lives, and they can afford houses, and they can afford affordable groceries.
What happens every single time?
It doesn't matter what you do.
Right.
You're never going to win that battle. Like, that's kind of the
not.
thing. If you're an actual materialist, you have to recognize that if people are satisfied with their material needs, they're never going to be revolutionary.
Never.
We're going to go up.
This is why.
But I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think that's going to happen. I think what's going to happen, like I said, because the United States is effectively self-sanctioning itself, even like the closed powers to the United States are considering trading with China. It's not going to get better for the United States. It's not going to get better for the American people.
I don't think it will either.
And even if they open up oil rigs in Alaska, it doesn't matter. They're going to charge up the ass. They're going to keep it at the prices post tariffs. We've seen this already. It's going to happen again, inevitably. You're underestimating how little actual
Biden.
I'm not
Biden
underestimating
of the United States, but Trump is definitely the Nero.
I'm not underestimating because I do recognize that all of this is going to happen. I'm saying that this isn't going to happen right away like we think it's going to, because he has secured what he's waiting for. This is the truth. This is the pure truth. Yes, we currently exist under a uniparty system. Okay, this is just the fact. For the majority of the Democratic leadership, they are coming to a consensus of where they are aligning with the Republican Party, because both parties are to the point now where they recognize that both of their party interests can be achieved through a common class antagonism, that being the ruling class. Now, with that understanding, we also have to realize they're going to continue to allow the Democratic Party to exist as a shattered party right now that it is. They're going to let it exist. That way, during midterms, they have somebody to scapegoat. And as soon as everything goes wrong, all Trump has to do is say, oh, well, it's Democrats because they're now in power. Now that they've leveled up the House, now that they've leveled up the Senate, or maybe just even because they've kind of boomed in popularity, they have some sort of grasp now to the midterm election cycle, right? Something is that's going to give him something to point the blame to. And that is when he is going to put out gas, reduce gas prices, try to satisfy to the people's needs, but continue to exploit them, continue to further fuck up.
He won't.
He can't. He can't.
He's going to feel it.
That's the truth. He can't, even if he wanted to. Like, that's kind of the thing. Like, as much as he'd like to pacify the American people,
I don't think he's going to pacify. I think he's just going to attempt to.
He can't. He's rubbing shoulders with the most richest people in the United States. He's not going to cross them. He's not going to say, hey, we need to take some of your wealth to make lives nominally better for the American people. How's that going to go over?
It's not a matter of he's going to be taking their wealth to satisfy the needs of Americans. I simply think it's a matter of this show mentality that he as a person has. He's going
How is he going to make that show? Prices just don't go down for no reason.
No, they don't go down for
somebody's profits.
They don't go down for no reason. I think it's going to end up coming.
Why it's not going to get better? Why Trump's not going to fix the economy is because.
Oh no, absolutely. These tariffs in the long run, are going to have a long-lasting effect on the economy.
That's kind of thing. He can't. He's not going to. I mean, even before he even took office, he said he wasn't going to get grocery prices down. He couldn't do it because he's not going to
be an immediate effect as well with the tariffs already in Canada.
That's kind of the thing. It's like he's not going to pacify the working class. Like, okay, if you wanted to pacify the working class, you would still have a well-enfranchised labor aristocracy. That's not a thing anymore. Pension plans aren't a thing at companies anymore. People can't afford houses. You have people talking about how the global 1% makes $140K a year, but you need about 120 to afford the average house. So you're telling me only the global 1% can afford the average house? Yeah,
literally anything that is not like completely locally made in like maybe a kilometer or two is going to be costing more, because everything nowadays in America and Canada, albeit to a slightly lesser extent, is
I don't think you realize how centralized production is. There's a handful of people that run the entire economy. It's incredibly centralized.
I know it's centralized. I'm saying more so that it's going to cost more in general because of how much gas.
Yeah, but the thing, sure. But like the thing is that like go to any of those CEOs and say, you know what, I need to appease my base, lower prices, and that's going to hurt your profits.
Yeah, they're not going to. They're going to increase it, and they're going to increase it more than the tariffs.
If you're worried about like Trump pacifying his base because he makes people's lives better, then you're toast as a Marxist. That's just a reality. There's nothing you can do.
I don't think he's going to make. I don't think he's going to be making people's lives better.
No. Well, I need you to understand that if he can pacify his base and he can give people a decent standard of living, I'm going to say this right now, and this is going to sound fucked up, but this is the unfortunate truth. Okay, this is going to sound evil. Okay, but the truth is that if a group of people can make a comfortable existence at the expense of another group of people, they will. Okay.
Well, so that's kind of the trend. That's kind of the historical trend, right? Is look at Nazi Germany. This was the
Nazi Germany is a perfect example. Like, they were perfectly fine, and this is the uncomfortable truth. Nobody, especially on the left, and this is what I'm talking about, copes, man. These are all copes. Is that if it comes down to it, why do you think like the Israeli guy on TikTok was mocking the Palestinians and drinking water and mocking about how they don't have water in the Gaza Strip?
Exactly.
Because at the end of the day, okay, is if that you can facilitate a decent standard of living for a group of people, they will build a society on your grave. Okay, so if you're a Marxist and you're basically worried about pacification and social democratic policies, and they're doing imperialism to do these sorts of things, you're screwed. That's the entire the third world is to write about that. Okay, because the fact is that if you have a well-enfranchised labor aristocracy, it is not in their material interest to be revolutionary, and you have to accept that fact as a materialist. Otherwise, you're coping. Okay?
I think that there will be a revolution. I'm not taking away from the revolutionary possibility. I'm simply trying to assert the fact that there is undoubtedly within this man's interest to at least attempt this. I believe that this attempt will fail.
Yeah. I mean, I think it will fail, and I'll tell you why. I mean, like I said, you got to look at the numbers. Like the left plays cope games. Okay, I'm not interested in the cope games anymore. So I'm not really aggressive about spreading ideas. I just tell people politely, and they can take it or leave it. Yeah. So hold on? I'm not done talking. What's going to happen is that I'll say it again. Production is already incredibly centralized in the United States. There's a handful of companies that dictate everything from above. Okay. And Trump rubbed shoulders with them. He's not going to go to these companies and be like, you know what? I need you to altruistically cut your profits to basically appease my base over the cost of living crisis.
He doesn't need to do that.
That's going to happen.
He doesn't need to do that.
Oh, okay. Pray tell how he's going to satisfy his base other than that.
It's not a matter of satisfying his base directly by telling the CEOs to go ahead and lower the gas prices. The gas prices, the prices themselves, will be affected due to the influx of supply.
From where?
From the Federal Reserve.
From the Federal Reserve. Okay, first of all, okay, can you eat money?
Oh, no.
No, you can't. It's not a substitute for real material wealth. They can print as much money as they like. That's not going to change real substantive actual products being produced. That's not going to make things cheaper. Okay, in fact, that's actually going to make things more expensive. In fact, the entire thing, the reason why they raised interest rates is because they're trying to tighten the money supplies, because they recognize that they overstimulated it with all these COVID bailouts, and when they gave a whole bunch of loans and low interest loans to BlackRock to buy up entire neighborhoods. But that didn't fix anything. It's because money is not a substitute for real concrete production. It never has, and it never will be. So no, Trump can't just use the Federal Reserve. I mean, they're talking about lowering interest rates. You know what that's going to do? It's just going to make prices of homes go up again.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So the thing is that, like, this is why I say, right? Okay. Trump is not going to cut into the profits of his corporate buddies to satisfy his base, because that's who he rubs shoulders with. He can't do it. In fact, he'd be called a communist well before he could even do that. You start to notice the contradiction on why Trump is going to exit political office as the most unpopular president in history. He can't fix the economy.
He's already trying to. So let's kind of go down the.
At best, is a shitty attempt at fixing the economy is going to be putting more tariffs. Let's be fucking real here.
Well, let's be honest about something. Right? The tariffs, they're fixing the economy, but they're only fixing the economy for the ruling class. That's it.
Yeah, because they're going to charge more than double the expected tariffs. They're going to charge out the ass. Yeah. Everything's going to go up.
How many more tax cuts? How many more tax cuts does this man need to give before the working class finally is fed up with it? I don't think it's going to take very long. I really don't.
Actually, the lower end of the working class are going to have tax increases.
Yes, they are. Luigi Mangione. Okay, it's already happening. Okay. And so like they're already getting fed up with it. I mean, I like here. Let me pull this up. I'll pull it up on stream. It was stabbed by man. Let's go over this, okay? You want to know the face of fed up of someone who ran out of it is what it is. This guy. This is his mugshot. Nobody smiles in a mugshot unless they got nothing left to lose. Okay, it's already starting to happen. Okay, Luigi Mangione isn't going to be the last instant. Every time some CEO gets out of line, you see no shortage of comments basically making Luigi jokes about how the CEO is getting insane. Like, that Palantir CEO who's talking about AI is going to make sure everybody's on their best behavior and they won't be able to say anything. Okay. The thing is that it's already going to happen. This is going to continue to happen. More people are going to snap out, and you're going to see people who are at the end of their ropes. They're going to crash out, man. And it's not going to be pretty. Okay.
You're going to see executives fall off buildings.
Yeah. And I'm not going to say things for obvious TOS reasons, but I'm just saying what's going to happen.
Yeah, I just want to say that we also should not forget the 19-year-old who set fire to a parliament or like a government member's building because of the TikTok ban.
Yeah, no, it's it's a micro revolution. The fact that a lot of Americans, when they tried to do the TikTok ban, they didn't just comply with it. They were like, you know what? In an act of defiance, we're going to download a Chinese app.
Did you read my article that I published?
Yeah, I went through a little bit about it. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, no, I actually had some points to make on that.
Hayden Stackowitz.
Oh well, it's funny to me that the TikTok ban.
Since it's like 2 a.m. Good night.
Okay. You have a good night,
No,
man.
you have a good night, yeah.
I'll probably call in Rob in about like 15, 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Man charged with I forgot about that one. I had entirely forgot about that one.
It is kind of
charged with. Yeah.
Oh shit. Man charged with okay. It is kind of funny to me, the addressing of the TikTok ban as a whole, right? Is because when we look at the TikTok ban, it really has nothing to do with TikTok as an app or even TikTok in general. It really comes down and as the title of my article kind of addresses it, it's not a matter of a threat to national security. It is a manipulation of material fact. That material fact being the fact that Republicans and Democrats have today become exactly one party. They are aligning their party's interests due to a common class antagonism. And that antagonism being the further exploitation of the working class as a whole. One is obviously doing things domestically to contribute to the domestic extraction of the working class, while the other has continued to finance and support the imperialist acts of the deep state, of the deep bourgeois state.
So the two-party system has always been that way.
It's always been that way.
The thing,
it's just that they're
even go
being
back to the 2000s, where the majority of the debates between the Republican and Democrat Party was arguments about how to raise and lower taxes, and that was literally it. Okay,
right.
It was how to more effectively manage the liberal democratic system. It's designed to filter out politics. It's not conducive to supporting the existing liberal democratic system. Okay, but the thing is, why weren't people challenging it then? Okay, well, when you have a satisfied base, like say in the 1950s or 60s, okay, and a single income from working a factory job can get you a family, a house, and a car, okay? Why would anybody have any need to revolt? They don't have any reason. And so even if the system is filtering politics and it is basically trying to preserve its own interest, if it's working in the benefit of the vast majority of people of that society, they have no interest in revolting. They never will, okay? And that means it's working. So they're going to play the system as much as they can. The only reason people are in radical politics, like that one tweet that went viral on Twitter a couple of days ago, whether you're either a fascist or a socialist now, liberalism is dead, is because the system doesn't work anymore. Okay? I mean, we're all seeing the consequences of that, where we're looking at the cost of living. I've talked about the stats endlessly: house prices, car prices, grocery prices. The fact all these things culminate into a single thing are the vast majority of the reasons why even like people, young men, go to the fascist right. I mean, they blame minorities and women and all that sorts of stuff, but they acknowledge the same symptoms that we're talking about. We're just coming up with a more nuanced view. We just acknowledge it for what it actually is. And so that's why we're talking about it, is because we're just telling the truth as it is, you know.
So I mean,
it's not black people, it's not minorities,
no, it's not
women. You know, that's a cope. I was talking to another guy about that sorts of stuff, right?
Here.
You know, it's because the reason why wages have gone so bad is because women entered the workforce. Okay, so you're blaming women for what unions could actually solve, and people could objectively get paid better and have a decent standard of living, but you don't want to address that elephant in the room. You don't want to be pro-union. You just want to blame women.
Even if it couldn't be fixed, you can't have a society where you're allowing someone to have such monetary value over the other side, because like we know what happened when women did not have that power. They killed their husbands with poison.
Yeah.
And they yes. And if they didn't, they got abused to death, or just had, you know, their whole life was a life of abuse in some cases because they couldn't get out. So either that, they kill their husband, or they kill themselves, or they get killed by the husband.
Yeah, it wasn't a good system. Anybody who's shilling for that system is either delusional or malicious. So, you know.
Yeah, so I'm actually going to read a bit of my article that I wrote to kind of give you guys an understanding of my kind of position with the TikTok ban. To further understand the current state of the American capitalist class and why they have collectively and unanimously come together, we as dialectical materialists must break down and assess the two-party dynamic. It is no secret that Democrats and Republicans split on social issues the better half of the time. However, it is also to be recognized that both parties will at all costs defend the profit motive, even in the case of willingly going against their voter basis, to protect their profit interests. Democrats failed to even come close to a win through this 2024 election cycle due to the fact of not addressing the issues that their supporters are most concerned with. It is often said in cases like this, when someone holds two opposing views and decisions and expect results of both equally, that they are trying to have their cake and eat it as well.
It all goes down to cope,
right?
It all goes.
It
down
really
to
all
cope.
comes down to
cope.
cope.
Gaslighting and lying.
Exactly.
You know, the Democrats. I still remember a month before the election happened, I was arguing endlessly with dipshits on Twitter and saying that, like, you know, the cost of living is real, but they were basically saying that the American people were just basically being babies about the cost of eggs. Oh, you just want fascism because of the cost of eggs. I'm sorry, but like, okay, if you are the person who basically says, I hope you enjoy fascism with the cost of eggs, I'm going to go back to what I've said a million times, and I'll say it again, is because, you know, when you go to basically hang out and you're looking at yourself in the mirror and you're just thinking by yourself, you're going to realize I'm right when I say this, okay? About the whole fascist, you know, having fascism for a cheaper cost of eggs. If people can have a decent standard of living at the expense of something else, and they can do it on the grave of other people, they will.
Exactly.
There's no shortage of instances throughout history. I could point to Nazi Germany. I could point to the British colonizers who genocided the Native Americans. Okay, that is an unfortunate fact of reality. Is that when it comes to material interests, if you don't satisfy those material interests of the people, they will erect a new society on your grave. Okay, and you can either accept this fact about reality, or you can cope about it.
So I actually go on further.
When November 5th came around and Donald Trump won the popular vote, it didn't surprise me. It's because all the Democrats did the entire time was lie, gaslight, and cope. And at the end of the day, is that if they can find a better alternative, even if it's from an authoritarian dictator, they will take it.
Right. No, you're absolutely right, and that's important to understand. And I feel like a lot of people are actually today coming to that conclusion.
Yeah, so it's blackpilling. It's a rough pill to swallow. I'm going to be 100% real with you. Is because the left prides itself on being the empathetic side, and this is the problem with the left. I'm not saying abandon empathy, but it needs to bring back reason and logic to recognize the existing conditions as they are instead of gaslight and cope about it. Okay, otherwise it will continue to lose. I mean, I'm honestly kind of glad that we're going down this route, just because the thing is that now the left has to actually
look at the general radical.
Right was.
Yeah, look at the general radicalization of the DSA.
It's in the same position as the alt-right in the 2017. We're the minority now, okay? The vast majority of people are sympathetic to Trump's policies. They have no problem deporting all these people if they think it's going to make their lives better. And that's the thing. The Democrats made the fatal mistake thinking that they could gaslight people over the last 10 years about this stuff, and things got progressively worse, and it smacked them in the face.
And now their voter basis has rapidly been radicalized.
Yeah, I mean, I got in an argument with the neoliberal on the main politics server earlier. There was like some Trump supporter, libertarian or whatever. Some guy in here talking about like small businesses and big businesses alike should be held to the same standard. And I was like, yeah, I agree. But like, the ruling class doesn't see it that way. The ruling class is capitalist when it benefits them. The ruling class is also socialist when it benefits them. When they said companies were too big to fail, it was all of a sudden the social responsibility of the American people to use their taxpayer dollars to bail out these corporations back in 2008. Okay. It was now a social responsibility for society. But when these companies recovered, was it socialized profits and these companies give back to American society? Of course not. In fact, they had PACs, they had a lobbyist group that actively lowered corporate tax rates to benefit themselves.
Right.
That's the problem.
So I actually said further in my article, I'm like, the truth behind the attempt to ban TikTok is to control the media that the American population consumes. Open sources have shown through TikTok that mainstream news outlets like Fox News, CNN, CBS, and the New York Times, much of the substances told about China, Hamas, Islamic liberation movements, and Central American socialist parties are nothing but lies or twisted truths to legitimize this idea of America being the police of the world. The material reality is the Republicans and Democrats have aligned their party interests to continue to expand their own class antagonisms. Oracle, the world's third largest software company, an American-based corporation, owns data collected by TikTok servers housed in Virginia and Singapore. By moving the vast majority of the American population away from blaming the government, the ruling class tells us that Chinese shareholders of the company are the sole communist owners of everything TikTok related. This being the case, it ignores the very capitalist relationship of the Chinese shareholders. Mind you, China is also competing in global capitalism. Ignoring that fact is a large issue of the modern world. So I go in and I further say, in return, China has taken the embracement approach of opening up its own social media platform, RedNote, to the rest of the world, showing that TikTok is biased toward corporate interests. The waves of TikTok refugees on RedNote are revealing the true life and standards of living under a socialist system. The road we take from here is providing the workers with the tools to emancipate themselves.
That's kind of the interesting thing. Do you want to know why China's opening up its internet and it's not really concerned about color revolutions inside its own borders, and it doesn't really care that Americans are on its platform, even if the CIA or the FBI is trying to basically do their little AstroTurf propaganda campaigns on it? Why do you think they're not concerned?
Well, I don't think they're concerned because at the end of the day, right, the global hegemony of the imperial core is undermined by the threat of of China as a developed alternative.
Yeah, I mean, it goes to much more simpler terms than that. It's the simple fact that the Chinese people have China has a well-enfranchised base, okay? And if you want the best security for any civilization state, if you have a well-enfranchised base that can have a decent standard of living, they have no reason to rebel. They have no reason to be angry, okay? And so the thing is, you can do these propaganda campaigns like I put in the announcements, right over here. Let's go ahead and open that up, shall we? Okay, I put it up a couple of nights ago. The U.S. Embassy in China, this is, I think, on RedNote. The average household in the United States has a net worth of $1.2 million, according to the Federal Reserve. I talked with this Matty Q like a couple of nights ago or whatever, right? Do you think a single Chinese person buys that?
Nope. Not a single person. It's misleading from the get-go. Talking about averages, like that, where billionaires skew the average upward, is misleading. Also, it says specifically households. That means like you can have like 10 people like in sleeping bags, like making $20,000 a year, and that's a 200K USD household total, and that would be included in the figure. And but nobody would argue that 10 people living in a one-bedroom apartment in sleeping bags is well off. Hello?
Alistair, are you there?
Know what to say. He is there.
No, he just I think he disconnected. No, you're absolutely right.
How do I sound now?
Yeah, no, you sound great. You disconnected for a second.
The reason why the Chinese are not afraid of that is because they have a well-enfranchised base. More people support the Communist Party of China than people who support than Americans support Congress. Okay,
Right.
they're not afraid of that propaganda. Is because any Chinese person that has a decent standard of living is not going to give a shit about these numbers because they're busy living their lives. They don't care about politics. They don't care about what's going on. And when they can look in the United States and see that people are working multiple jobs just to get by, and San Francisco people are like albed up on drugs, wandering the streets, and they can see people complaining about the cost of living or look at the numbers on the actual house prices. They know these numbers are bullshit. Okay. And so they don't have any fear of a color revolution anymore. It's because when you have a well-enfranchised and enriched civilization, there's no reason for them to revolt. Honestly, like I said earlier, you got to give credit to the CPC. Credit where credit's due is because they recognize the material reality of things that when it comes to revolution, color revolutions or communist revolutions or whatever, right? People aren't going to revolt if they have decent lives. That's just a fact. Think about it this way. Okay. If you had a cozy job that's making you $200K a year and you have like a 3-story house or some sorts of shit and you're just kind of enjoying your life, you can take like fucking 3 vacations a year or what have you, okay, and then you hear something fucked up going on in another country, I don't think I would say statistically you're probably not gonna care because you're busy living a good life, and that's the fucked up part.
I want to say that like one of the things that went around was like the fact that they didn't know if the fact that the ambulance costs money was propaganda or not. They didn't know if that was propaganda that the Chinese government had fed them or if that was real.
Yeah.
A lot of them did not know, and it's like now they know how fucked up it is.
Yeah. One ambulance ride.
Party is just they're just winning on that. They're just winning on the dystopia of America.
What do you think? What do you think the average? What do you think the average is for Americans going into debt due to an ambulance ride? What do you think the average is for that?
$2,000.
$2,000, the average. So just estimate that, right? Estimate how many Americans day to day, or better yet, over a year span, right? How many Americans do you think are ending up in piles of medical debt simply because of a fucking ambulance ride?
Yeah, I just want to say I've only taken the ambulance once, and I feel like it's a situation where an American might not have gone to the hospital. I realized later as I was at the hospital that I was just constipated, but you know how constipation can feel like. They've said that like constipation is like the closest you can get to feeling anything close to pregnancy, like when you give birth, and I'm like, yeah.
You know what? This isn't.
They say that it's close in pain to a heart attack in some situations, if you have a really bad one.
Right.
But anyway, I went with the ambulance. I like half fainted, fell asleep, and then my dad came home or whatever, and he called the ambulance or whatever. But yeah, like. Most people would just sit that one out, I feel, in America.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
I remember when somebody asked me if they wanted to call an ambulance for me. And I said, fuck no, I'm just going to drive myself. I'm not going to fucking pay for that shit.
Yeah. In America, you would have probably called like a taxi or an Uber for
It's not even just with ambulances,
That's what actually happens, yeah.
It's not even just with ambulances anymore. It's actually just first responders altogether now. Look at the current waves of privatization going on with firehouses. That's insane. Do you know how many fire departments are now just letting houses and buildings burn down because people can't afford to like pay the departments to save their houses? Like how many people do you think are going to end up suffering from this? People are going to now be homeless. People are going to risk dying in a fire because what? It's not profitable for some person who owns a department.
You can have someone be paid for like a couple hours to spray some water or like whatever.
So stupid. It's so stupid.
Instead of like having Because I don't think America understands that when your citizen has to pay for something, your society has to pay for something, no matter if they're taking that out of their own pocket or the government pays for it. Your society still pays for it.
These are
in the
things
end.
that
Yeah, they do. You do. And I'll give you a perfect example of that. I go back to homelessness, okay, because, people automatically think, because, like, whenever a public transportation thing comes into the United States, they always like, how can I make money off of this? How can I make this thing pay for itself, okay? And they are so concerned on nickeling and diming people, so some program pays for itself locally, okay? They have no concern on whether or not this pays for itself globally, for civilization state, for society as a whole. Okay, they are not capable of thinking things outside of an individualistic, virtuistic bubble and thinking of things on the global stage. Okay, so like when it comes to public transportation, an efficient and robust public transportation system would largely end homelessness and make people overall more efficient and productive for society as a whole. But the American populace doesn't see it that way. They see it as something to nickel and dime of right now. They don't think about it on a societal level. Yeah, exactly. I remember going to the grocery store years ago. And, I was just kind of like, whatever. I was in a bit of a rush and I was picking up some stuff and I was going to head on home and yada, yada, yada. It was nothing big deal, right? And so I was like, there's this long ass line. They had only one register open. It's kind of like Walmart. They're just doing the shit Walmart does, right? And I'm thinking in the back of my head, right? Everybody else's time, not just my time, but everybody else's time is being wasted because they don't want to staff additional people. It's because they're too fucking lazy and greedy to basically staff more people on their registers. Okay. So I was like, you know what? I'm a little bit frustrated. I don't got
big thing.
Oh yeah. I got a little bit frustrated. I was like, you know what? I'm going to go. I'm going to bounce and I'm going to basically, I'm going to come back later. Right. And so I put the stuff down. I'm like, I'm going to head on out. I'll come back later. And this lady came to me. She's like, oh, you just need to be patient and understand there's a virtue in waiting for things. And it's like, it's all about this individualistic virtue of how much you can just suck up shit as an individual rather than recognizing global and social efficiency. And it dawned on me because I didn't think about it, but when I was driving away, I told her, I was like, I don't have the time. I got to go do some other things. Like, I need to pick up something now, and I'm not going to wait in the line with like 10 people because a company is too lazy as fuck to actually hire additional people to make sure that these lines get processed faster. I was like, I got to bounce. But in her mind, it was like, this is a deficiency of my moral character for not just, going through with it and just dealing with it.
Taking the abuse, basically.
And societally, that translates to public transportation, homelessness, right? Because we're so trying to make things like we'd rather just kind of tough it out on some basis of virtue rather than think about things logically and efficiently on a global scale. And that's the shittiest thing about especially the United States on why, convincing them like think about like 15-minute cities, like how conservatives fear-mongered the shit about that. Like even though they were like nothing big, it was like, okay, we should have walkable 15-minute cities that are convenient. And they somehow managed to convince everybody that, having walkable cities is some kind of authoritarian communist nightmare because suburbanoids got a wild hair up their ass and thought of black people or some shit.
Because Americans love walkable cities. They love going on vacation in like America's only few walkable cities. And they love going to fucking Disney World, which is just Europe, but Disney, like.
I gotta point out, like
this.
I gotta actually mention a funny
And they love
story,
going to Europe, and they love walking those streets. Like, yeah, it's tough for them because they're not used to walking, but they love going to Europe and walking the streets or whatever. But they see it as like something that's a luxury, that's a vacation,
Yep. I gotta actually mention a funny story about the 15-minute city thing. So in my own city in Canada, right? Downtown is literally like a 15-minute fucking city. And I won't give too much detail, but someone I know, right? He was like, oh my god, I'm fucking scared of like 15-minute cities. And it's like, dude, we're literally like in fucking Toronto.
Yeah.
What do you mean you're scared about like 15-minute cities?
That's funny.
Have you guys read?
I'll give you another example.
I'm scared of this thing. I pay massive amounts of money.
It's gonna mean that you can only stay. Yeah, he thought that it meant that like you can only stay in a.
I'll give you another example.
Zone.
I'll give you another example of like this incapability of like logistical efficient thinking. Okay, because when I was at work at a couple of companies back, whatever, right? One of my bosses was super pro electric vehicle. And don't get me wrong, I'm pro electric vehicle as well. I love electric vehicles. I want to see more people to drive it because I think it's actually something conducive to fighting climate change. But the thing is, the proper infrastructure isn't there. It's not a one-time solution. I could, go into
also, like,
nuclear power plants, but like, I want to focus on this instance to serve the purpose of what I was trying to say earlier, is that he was more or less talking about electric vehicles. And I said, the main problem with electric vehicles, and I support them entirely, I want to see more people use them. But the problem is the infrastructure isn't quite there yet. Okay. The thing is if you were to convert 330 million people and put them all on electric vehicles, you also have to take into consideration that it takes about 5 minutes to fill up a gas tank. It takes a little bit longer to charge up your electric vehicle. So you have the problem with gas stations.
It's not even that. It's not even that.
Oh, it is that. It is that. I'll tell you why.
It is that too, but it's also the fault. Like, where is the electricity coming from? And
no, I agree. I agree.
Say all your
I do want to get into that.
Yeah.
But, we'll reach that talking point in just a second. You're right about that. But,
Okay,
let me, you're absolutely right. But let me finish up my talking point. I'm going to get to that. I was actually going to get to that. You're absolutely right. But, so it's all good. So, but the thing is that I pointed out the logistical problem of that if you have 330 million people and it's not just you who's getting your car charged up, you need to find a way to address the problem that it takes about, even with superchargers, it takes like an hour to charge up your car. Okay. If everyone needs to charge up their car, the waiting lines at the gas station equivalents for electric vehicles, the lines are going to be out the ass is because everybody's trying to charge up their cars because per car, you have to wait 60 minutes. Okay. And that's another, and he basically is like, well, that's not an important thing. Everyone just needs to use electric vehicles and just kind of tough it out. And once again, another failure of global logistic thinking of how to make things more efficient broadly for society. And to your talking point earlier, when you talked about it, it also matters where the electricity comes from. Absolutely, 100%. One of the big talking points I talk about all the time is that electric vehicles are not in themselves a solution to climate change. It's a piece of infrastructure that's going to facilitate it as opposed to gasoline cars, but you also have to change out the energy grid, okay? And so I want to drop people with a fun fact right now that I hope you remember to your heart, and you basically, I want you to autistically scream it at other people who are talking about climate change so they can understand in their thick skulls the actual solution to climate change, okay? Right now, 20% of the electricity generated in the United States is generated by nuclear power plants, and that's about 98 nuclear fission power plants, okay? If the United States wanted to completely decarbonize any kind of energy generation, they would go nuclear, and it would only take 500 nuclear power plants to power the existing United States at its existing electrical capacity. And the reason I'm a big pro...
I wouldn't be scared of hydroelectricity either, as another example, because that's another really good source of electricity that people always overlook.
And so the reason why I'm a big nuclear fission power fan, okay, the reason I'm such a huge fan of that, okay, is how much energy do you think is in a kilogram of coal or gasoline? Take a guess. I don't know. Choose any number. I know you don't really have an intuition about that, but you just pull a number out of your ass, and then I'll tell you anyways.
I just want to say that I was someone. You're not going to convince me, Alistair, because I was someone who was for, like, in a sense, like, nuclear power for environmental reasons, but then I'm not anymore.
Why? I think I can convince you. I mean,
the big thing for me is one of the arguments, and when you say this argument, is also like when you say that nuclear factories don't last that long. Often, like proponents' argument is, but we will find the technology to make them last longer.
A lot of nuclear power plants have been in existence since the 70s. They're not building new ones.
But they're also very many countries are planning to shut their nuclear power plants down when they start getting bad, because they don't do very much at some point.
So I'm going to go back to the whole code thing, okay? Because the thing is it's going to come down. No, I'm talking. One sec. Let me finish this up, man. Okay. You are not going to solve climate change with solar and wind. Okay. It does not have the energy capacity, and the only way you're going. No. Hold on. The thing is that
and water is very damaging water energy is also very damaging.
So you're not going to fix the climate crisis with something. The thing is all that carbon dioxide that was put in the atmosphere has been put in the atmosphere over the course of the last 200 years, since the start of the Industrial Revolution. Okay, all that was spent energy. Okay, you burned some kind of organic fuel to generate energy in the process of creating carbon dioxide. You have to put in just as much energy, if not more, because that's just how thermodynamics works, to undo all that. Okay, and so the only way you're going to do it, you're going to have to get that energy somewhere. Okay, because like I said, reality does not care about anybody's feelings. It's no different than the unceasing tides of the sea. It will sweep you under the sea, regardless of what you think or feel. Okay, and so.
I just want to ask, do you think that if we don't find a way to dispose of nuclear waste in a way that can communicate to people that it's dangerous,
it is dangerous.
Do you think that it's still worth it?
Yes. You want to know why?
Why?
Okay. So that's why I want to get back to the energy sample. So you get about 28 megajoules per kilogram of coal and probably about 38 megajoules of energy per kilogram of gasoline. Okay, how much energy do you think you can get out of uranium-235 at an equivalent mass?
Shit.
Around 120.
I am gonna guess.
I know it's
So
more than
anybody, how many more times, like multiplier-wise? I want you to tell me how many more times energy can you get per unit mass from uranium-235? Anybody, spitball your number. Type it in the chat. I don't care.
69.
5 times more.
I don't even know.
At least.
About 1 million times more energy.
Oh, I was thinking of millions and trillions.
Yeah, it's about 6 to 7 orders of magnitude. So about 1 to 10 million times more energy. You get about 13.6 million megajoules per kilogram of uranium-235. And so the reason why I'm not so concerned about the nuclear waste problem is because when you're extracting that energy, you require significantly less nuclear fuel to get the same amount of energy from uranium-235 as opposed to coal or gasoline. Okay, and so even though you have 500 nuclear power plants, like the pool sizes to store like nuclear waste, and plus also reprocessing centers have gotten much more efficient at neutralizing nuclear waste, is because here's kind of the thing about radioactive materials. Okay, something is either radioactive and it produces energy, or it's not radioactive and it just is an inert element. Okay, if something is highly radioactive, it doesn't last for very long. If it's it's not radioactive and has a very long half-life, it's ineffective. The proton has a half-life of about the age of the universe, times 10 or something like that. It's some crazy, ridiculous half-life. The longer the half-life, the less radioactive it is, okay? The only time when radioactive materials become a problem are elements like cesium-137, which have a half-life that's about 13 years. So it stays radioactive for a couple of decades, maybe 100 years or something like that. But you can't have something be highly radioactive and have a long half-life. They're inversely proportional. It's kind of like with diseases and viruses, okay? Either something can be highly contagious or it can be lethal, okay? If it's highly lethal, it can't really spread effectively because it can't be contagious because it kills the host before it can spread. Like there's a couple of viruses, like rabies. They don't transmit very fast, but when they do transmit, they kill people really quickly and efficiently. Or you can have something like the common cold, which transmits very effectively. It's just a minor nuisance, but it doesn't kill people, okay? It's the same thing with radioactivity.
Saying is that the effects of the environment on us, if we don't go with nuclear power, would be worse in the long run than the effects of a human finding this, dying, and people, after a while realizing, okay, this thing is dangerous, and then doing the same thing we're trying to do. We're like, okay, how do we?
So I think what the overarching point, right?
People are overly being defensive on how to mitigate like nuclear waste and treating it more of a problem than it actually is. And I'll give you an example. Did you know, for instance, that when it comes to the coal that's being burnt by coal factory power plants, they're producing a tremendous amount of radiation too, is because all that coal that's being dug out the ground, it has radioactive elements in it that are getting ousted into the atmosphere. And, that's why like a lot of, coal power plants are incredibly toxic to be around, is because it's not exactly the coal or the carbon that's being burned that's toxic. It's everything else that you're pulling out of the ground. Okay. And that's why I'm a big nuclear, fission power supporter for now. Okay. Because at the end of the day, it's the only thing that if you don't want to have a major sacrifice to your standard of living in any sort of way, it's the only power source that's going to deliver that. Okay. And if you're going to go down the route of saying, okay, well, we just need to basically cut down energy usage to a 10th, okay, and basically go with that sorts of stuff, good luck convincing the vast majority of people to give up their standard of living to basically like cut down their standard of living. They were like, I've already talked about how people literally commit genocide to have a decent standard of living at the expense of other people. You're never going to convince, the rest of humanity to kind of go through with it, right? And so accepting that fact, that is why I'm a pro-nuclear fission person, is because I recognize that when it comes to maintaining a standard of living and civilization as it exists now, that is the only solution that emits virtually no carbon dioxide, is because nowhere in the nuclear process in splitting the atom does it emit carbon dioxide.
This argument.
Also,
I want to know your opinion about it. Say your thing first.
I can't get a word in.
No, we're actually letting you have a word in, dude.
I was going to say, like, even if with like nuclear fission, that like, fuck, I can't even remember anymore. I've been cut off so many fucking times. I'm out.
It's all. Yeah, he's running on low sleep, but yeah.
So I actually want to input something. I do think, right, it's not a matter of trying to address this from a nuclear waste argument, right? Because nuclear waste, that's going to be a thing that will eventually have to be solved, but it's not something that's going to have to be solved in the short time, right? In the short time, what this is going to allow, and the focus on nuclear fusion and nuclear energy as a whole, right? With the fact that it actually takes less and less actually produces more energy, right? I believe this is going to actually allow the environment and give the conditions necessary for the environment to self-heal itself. And eventually, this will be a slow process, but over time, as we reduce the amount of toxic waste from industrial resources, the nature will have a self-healing process.
Yeah, it's going to take time. It's not going to happen overnight. And so the fact is the decisions you make now culminate over decades. Okay. And so I remember back in 2020, and American Promethean can vouch for me on this behalf. Like, people were talking about carbon capture techniques. Okay. And they were talking about creating these giant farms that would pull carbon dioxide out of the air. Okay. And for years, I talked about how, again, nobody's thinking at it from an energy perspective. Okay, where are you going to get energy from? Because if you want to do anything, energy is literally the capability to do work. Okay. And so the idea is that you filter air and it pulls carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. Nobody talked about the actual numbers or the energy that goes in to do it, because it's not a passive filter. Okay. You have to power this process. You have to filter out, carbon dioxide molecules from nitrogen and oxygen. And so the thing about it is, how do you do that? Well, you have to actually put in energy to the system to actually facilitate that process. It's called the entropy of mixing. If you want to undo the entropy of mixing, you have to supply energy. Unfortunately, when it comes to the second law of thermodynamics, if you reduce the entropy in one part of the universe, you have to raise it up in another part just as much, if not more. Okay? And so, again, where's that energy coming from? They were powering these like carbon capture plants with coal power plants. And ironically enough, they were burning more energy from the coal power plants just to power those processes to only get a fraction of that carbon dioxide back out of the atmosphere.
Yeah. I just want to say, what do you think of the argument that focusing on nuclear power will stop people, like will put less focus on people focusing on other alternatives? Like,
I don't think it will.
I don't think it will.
I don't think it will. I think.
Why wouldn't it? Because it always when we think of a topic, there's gonna be a like an infinite amount of amount of people who work to find the next energy source, like in science. Like, there's, especially since like,
what's going to fuel that research? All those research facilities. If you're going to be working on fusion reactors, that takes a tremendous amount of energy just to test those tomahawks, tokamaks. The thing about those things is that, like, okay, if you cut down civilizational energy usage to a tenth of what it is now, you won't be able to facilitate that research, because again, the underlying laws of physics, that's just the way things are. You can't argue with this sort of stuff. That's like arguing with the speed of light, or why the wind blows.
How do you
These things
feel?
are just
So since things will get better because of this, we will slowly get better health,
Yes.
and there will be more scientists doing this.
I do
Yes,
wonder,
I mean,
Alistair. What are your
that's why I
thoughts
say it's
on?
like, you know,
But-
it's the least shitty solution.
Yes, but it's gonna take a long time because like the restoral of like going back these like 200 years in like environmental like destruction is gonna take a long time. Like how long is it going to take until this become like the scientists become so many,
I mean,
that
how
it
long
makes
is it
up
going to
for
take?
it,
Well,
for it to make up for it?
I mean, the thing is that like there might not. Maybe nuclear fusion is impossible because, like, you know what nuclear fusion is. If you wanted to basically go to that instead of nuclear fission, which is what most people are, afraid of, which is understandable. Energy is dangerous, whatever.
Yeah,
But
I know.
The thing about nuclear fusion is they're trying to replicate the conditions of fusion going on in the core of the sun. Like nobody has that in their backyard.
Exactly,
Okay?
and I'm
Like,
honestly,
that takes a yeah. So the thing is that like the why I'm such a pro nuclear fission shill is because I recognize it as virtually the only solution with the existing tech right now. And if people want to have a better future, because we're at the crossroads here. Like right now, we're at the crossroads, and so we can either choose to acknowledge the situation that we're in, and it's an uphill battle at this point, is because we've already done a tremendous amount of climate damage already. Is that we can either accept like what we need to do, or we can just cope about it and like let things continue going as they are.
I also
And,
fully believe.
and then we deal with the consequences.
I also fully believe that by embracing this, right, it's actually going to give us as humans, as a civilization, a better understanding of the energy that we interact with. And I say that, well, actually, look at the Kardashev scale. The Kardashev scale is kind of a good layout of this, right? We currently sit at a less than a scale than it. We currently sit at less than a Category 1 planet. Okay, Category 1 civilization. And this is because we have not yet to master all of and control all of the energy on our planet and the energy of our own sun. Nuclear fusion, nuclear fission, and the development of this will allow us to understand this more. That way, later on in our societal development, we can better benefit from alternative fusion, from alternative energy sources.
I mean, these things stack pillars upon pillars. If you take one pillar, the whole system comes crumbling down. And so that, energy is the most foundational pillar of modern society. It's literally what powered the Industrial Revolution. All that machinery, all those factories, everything being produced relies on energy, whether it be gasoline, coal power, wind, solar, nuclear. It doesn't really matter.
And honestly, if you consider yourself a materialist, this is the current materialist analysis that is being made by China. Even China's been embracing this.
Yeah, no, China's been building a tremendous amount of nuclear fission power plants because, again, they recognize it from a scientific angle on how to actually solve the problem. They're not trying to basically, fulfill some ideal solution, nor are they ignoring the problem, okay? Because in the United States, there are two sides, okay? In the United States, you have the conservatives that are basically, well, either climate change doesn't exist or it does exist and there's nothing we can do about it, so we might as well continue gas guzzling with these, like, stupid-ass Ford F-150s or some crazy shit.
Right.
But on the progressive side of it all...
I don't think anyone wants that, though. Like, people want the solution. It's just like, they feel, the government is pushing the individualistic approach where they're like, you get better.
Yeah. But the political left, I would say, has probably done more damage, is because the fact is that they have basically kind of wobbled around several different solutions. And this is kind of thing, again, we're at a crossroads, okay? Either cope or find a better solution. And so the thing is that when it comes to it, the progressive left, I've watched for my entire life as people were anti-nuclear. I was pretty agnostic to it initially because I just wasn't invested into climate change. But recognizing it as a real thing, I have to be scientific about it because you can't really afford not to be about it. Either we choose to go with the scientific solution to solve climate change, or we don't. And so, I'm just spreading these numbers in a hope that everybody in this chat who's listening will spread it to their buddies, tell other people, and spread the word and say, hey, this is an emergency. Either we go with the solution or we don't. There's no in between. Either it gets fixed or it doesn't. We either fix it and we don't deal with whatever happens as like the second order consequences of climate change, or we don't. Because the thing is, we don't know how far this is going to go. We don't know what's going to happen, when, some permafrost layer, we don't know what non-linearities are going to come as a consequence because of climate change. People have already speculated about permafrost methane really accelerating climate change in a nonlinear fashion, where once you reach that threshold and you start dissolving the permafrost, it's going to release a tremendous amount of methane to the atmosphere, and it's going to cause a runaway effect where it's going to cause even more tremendous amount of global warming, similar to previous periods in Earth's history, where the global temperature might go up by 10 degrees Celsius on average, and that destroys basically both the ice in the north and the south, and the Arctic and the Antarctic.
And it destroys the amount of space on Earth we can inhabit.
Yeah, entire regions become uninhabitable. These things culminate. There's not room for failure in this. Okay. So yeah, no, spread the word. Share these ideas, have them challenged, be open-minded, and try and basically engage in scientific thought and actually exchanging ideas. That's actually what I want people to do more often with. Not do the progressive cope of just, repeating empty sloganeering that you don't understand. I want you to engage with the ideas, share them, and honestly evaluate them on your own terms and come to your own logical conclusions. If you don't believe a single word that I say, I urge you to do your own research.
And honestly, that is the scientific method, right? That this is the very framework of being Marxist, of being scientific socialist. We need to do this. We need to have these discussions. We need to further understand them and research them and come to our own very conclusions. Don't seclude yourself with just talking points and just try to don't fall into these empty slogans. That sloganeering is only going to send you down a pathway of coping. Coping is only going to send you down a pathway of coinciding with the conditions worsening. If you concede to the conditions worsening, if you let the conditions dictate every foundation of your own principle, if you just become the very parasitic class that you are oughting to ought out, there is no point. There is no reason to even become class conscious. So
I'll give an example, like an analogy. It's more of an analogy, okay? And I'll put it in terms of this, okay? Every once in a while when it comes to it, because I have a friend who's a doctor, and they tell me every once in a while, there's always this one cancer patient that does this stuff, like, they get a cancer diagnosis and they're told, you need to do this, chemotherapy, and it sucks. Nobody wants to do it. It's fucking ass, okay? Chemotherapy is terrible, okay? And but the thing is every once in a while you get somebody that goes into the delusional cope where they're like, what, I'm going to do the all natural, like, I'm going to do kale smoothies or some crazy shit. And they cope about the fact that they're literally dying. And it's not fun to watch, is because they cope all the way up into their last moments. And it's not fun to watch. Okay. And that's what I'm watching from a civilizational scale about climate change, especially with the progressive left. Okay. Because, they will literally, go on with their lives thinking nothing's a problem. And the next thing you know, they just start like having a bunch of problems. They have seizures because it's spread to their brain, and, they're hospitalized. They don't even know who the fuck they are. It's not pretty. And so the thing is that, like, when you're presented an option, you can either cope about it or you can't cope, or you can address it and try and find solutions to the problem, Again, try and be a problem solver. I don't see it any other way,
I think that's all I have to say about anything that we've discussed so far. I'm going to go ahead and shut down the stream.
Sounds good.
But I think, moreover, I do want to explore later on more, probably with another discussion over China and the current development of China, just because it is interesting to see where they lie on the competitive stage against current U.S.
This sounds like a good idea. I think that, like, at least maybe a couple of streams would be good talking about the cost of living crisis, because that's becoming a hot topic on YouTube nowadays. There's a lot of these micro channels popping up where they talk about how Gen Z is screwed, and they talk about the cost of living crisis, and they try to talk about how to basically weather it and kind of get around it.
Alrighty. Yeah, no, sounds good. I'm ending the stream right now.
American Marxist, I have a question.
Give me 1 second. Let me end the stream.